See, you missed it. Perfect cold open a minute earlier. So, who's going to introduce us?
It's Ben's show this time.
Well, I don't know. Is it my show? He said it's my
You're the
show.
expert.
I'm the expert. Okay, well, welcome to While We Weren't Recording ASMR. Today we're covering the filmography of Akira Kurosawa using two of his collaborations with the renowned Japanese cinematographer. I forget his name. And these are the only two films made
Poor
with this.
guy.
I don't know. It's a real fact.
No, yeah.
His two.
You're doing great.
His two features: the 1950 feature Rashomon, which had mainstream success in the West, and the 1961 feature, also starring, what's his name?
Mifune.
Toshiro Mifune, Yojimbo, better known in the West as the spaghetti western For a Fistful of Dollars.
Or even better, there's an even better one.
Is it really?
Last Man Standing.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm sitting there listening to it. I was like, man, those are both missed opportunities for a Western episode, because it's like I love both of these movies, but they don't compare to True Grit, right? So
Sure.
But the whole time I'm like, I was actually sitting there as it gets teed up, and I'm like, this is like The Last Man Standing. So I go pull up the trivia, and it's like it kind of inspired The Last Man Standing. I'm like, fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
So it's amazing how many of his movies, while they definitely draw inspiration from earlier movies like that are Western Hollywood movies, and he kind of gets grief in Japan for being too Western. He's also a huge influence on Western audiences. He invents a movie we didn't watch, Seven Samurai, apparently invented the genre that the Avengers basically is, right? They get the team together movie. Get the team together, put down the bad guy. That's the Seven Samurai, and that's, of course, becomes Magnificent Seven. You follow that through. And half the time he gets, even though he invents these forms of storytelling for cinema, he gets screwed out of royalties because Toho plays games with licensing. I think he ends up having to sue Toho, the film company that technically owns the films, for rights to some of these stories. And that's why half of his filmography is film credits on movies he had nothing to do with, just because he gets the writing credit for that story. A couple of different stories, and Yojimbo is one of them.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. Like, Yojimbo's trivia was a little bit more informative on some of that, but it's like, he was getting inspired often by Western stories, which I thought was kind of ironic, because I only knew it as far as like, Magnificent Seven is, inspired by one of his stories or whatever, but it's like, it's possible that it, some of that goes back even further, and it's ironic that they like leapfrog, right? That it was like Westerns, then samurai, then Westerns again, for some of them, but at least, yeah, Yojimbo for sure is that, whereas Rashomon is kind of its own thing. So yeah.
Rashomon is one that I've seen referenced a lot of times as like, this movie is taking inspiration from Rashomon and its weird storytelling. It's like, I don't know what this is, but I've seen that enough that I have to just put this on the list of like, what is this thing that everyone's talking about? So, I mean, I think.
Are you glad? Are you glad that you finally? Yeah.
It's.
Go ahead.
Well, it's like, so I think I enjoyed Yojimbo more because it felt like watching an anime movie. I like anime, so this is perfectly fine. It really reminded me of Samurai Champloo at Rashomon. Like, I could see why it was so impactful to people to then try to model it off of sometimes in terms of the multiple different story streams. And Rashomon was certainly more cryptic, but I enjoyed it a lot too.
What movies have you seen that's referenced Rashomon as like this is where they got it from?
The last thing I can concretely remember was The Last Duel with it had Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and I forgot the woman's name, and it was kind of a similar story. It was a historical period as well, of the last duel to the death in France. Of there was a woman that was raped, and her story of events, the rapist events, and the husband's events, they didn't line up in a way. They, in concrete ways, they did, and there was a lot of very careful acting to show just how very little changes made a lot of difference in the meaning, but all leading up to the fact that the husband and the rapist had to fight to the death to see who gets to live.
Okay, yeah, because like I think one of the things that I noticed in this story, I felt like, was that two of the tellings were closer to each other, and one was completely different.
Right. I mean, for me, the two that pretty well lined up was the bandit and then the woodcutter. You know, like their stories overlapped largely, and so like you can the way the movie's done. Looking at it in hindsight, is like because you don't have any indication, like they're all talking to the judge or the magistrate or whatever, right? But there's no dialogue from that side. They're always just responding, so it kind of puts the audience in that seat. And so that's just been one of those things that I've done over time, which is like there's always your story, their story, and then there's the truth, right? And you got to look for the overlap is probably more likely where the truth starts to come out. And like, yeah, for whatever reason, both the samurai and his wife are practically telling fairy tales. But then you've also got to take in the priest's account of like, he doesn't believe that a dead man would lie because, he's dead. What does he have to gain from it? Makes some kind of sense. But then you're sitting there and like the samurai's point of view gets told by a medium. So are we sitting here believing that the medium is legit as the movie tries to show you, or are they a charlatan just making up their own version of the story? So really it might not even be the husband's story. It might be a play put on by this medium. There's some depth there for sure, but yeah.
I thought that I had the same thought when she started speaking. I was like, well, since she's speaking with like the husband's voice that's that voiced over, I assume the people make the movie wants to make it clear that this is supposed to be his, like that is what he is saying.
Right.
But the movie is certainly treating it as the fact. Yeah.
Yeah, but how do you reconcile that the story like has nothing to do with the other, 3 or 4 versions that you heard? Like, that's part of the problem too, though. So, and it's funny though, because from the trivia I saw that, Kurosawa says it doesn't matter, right? Like it's just supposed to be a mess because that's real life. And it's just like, okay, so it's just like,
Well, so
to me, I would just go with like the guy's about to get executed for murder. So he's got every reason to confess if that's what he wants to do. It's not like he's lying to save his skin. And the woodcutter's story largely overlaps. That's the version I would go with, right? But then you got to wonder like why she and dude's ghost can't get it straight on like how he died, So I don't know.
Specifically, the wife basically incriminated herself. She didn't do anything to protect herself. Like she almost admitted to murdering her husband when if she just followed what the bandit had said, then he gets the blame and she's free.
Right.
And my little tinfoil theory was that the guy listening to the story, unnamed, he had made some form of comment about there was a demon up in these hills and even the people scared that away. It's like, are they being possessed by a demon? And that's what's making them, one, getting crazy memories, and two, acting so bizarrely suddenly out of character. Kurosawa doesn't seem to have, yes, exactly. But Kurosawa doesn't seem to have like actually commented on that, at least in the perusal of the trivia.
I think it's more about the act of perception and creating stories and trying to understand things. It's like the word for that in philosophy is epistemology. How do you know something? And it's not just the method of how do you know it, how is it trustworthy? And so Kurosawa, in adapting this short story, if you notice in the credits, the short story is not actually called Rashomon, right? The Rashomon is the name of the anthology in which the short story is sometimes placed. There's a couple different stories, but what he's doing is he's taking the story in a grove and using another story as kind of a framing device. To ask the question, can we really understand anything? Can we access reality? Can we understand reality? And because Kurosawa kind of has a dismal critical streak in him? The answer is no. And that's I think this is one of the reasons why it became so popular in the post-war West, is because that's been a theme of Western philosophy since Descartes. Kind of a lack of faith that we can know anything, that we can access reality. So I think that's kind of more where he's going. It's not so much what actually happened; it's we can't know what actually happened, and I think it's what he's getting at when he says that's real life is a mess. I don't know. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense. I disagree with that.
Oh, okay.
That general no, not your interpretation, but that general philosophy in
Oh, I do too.
as
Yeah.
it comes as well. It's like, there are definitely verifiable facts, right? Certainly there are places where it becomes a gray area, or competing interpretations don't necessarily disagree. That you can definitely get into some areas where that becomes a little more wishy-washy, but you know like what happened in the story is objective fact. There is a true narrative of what actually took place. We're just not getting it from a reliable narrator at any point, right? Either it's entirely possible that one of the four of them is telling the gospel truth of what happened, right? But almost certainly, because of human nature and things like that, they're all imperfect narratives of what's going on. And so that's where you get, try to take the facts of where they overlap, especially between the four of them, because that's going to be a lot closer to the truth. But yeah, as a fifth party observer, when you come in after the fact and you listen to four other accounts of it, like, put yourself in the priest's shoes, right? He doesn't know what the hell happened, and he's not going to know for a fact what happened, but we know for a fact dude's dead. And we know for a fact that like, there are facts that you can lay down, and that's where I quibble with that kind of philosophy, right? It's like even in this storytelling, there are objective facts that you can lift out of there. You just got to try to wonder, like, in her case, is it trauma, right? Absolutely makes sense. That she's got all sorts of trauma from the experience, and maybe her telling gets a little fuzzy or whatever. Also got to wonder, like, personally, I wonder, like, so many of the tellings has her basically be like, only one of you can live, and I'll go with whoever's the winner, right? Is another common thread through several of the storytelling. So does she show up to kind of throw in her lot with the bandit? Is that another angle of the story? Anyway, there's plenty of speculation. We don't know for sure, but there is objective fact, for whatever the outcome is and what's going on, and her motivations and whatnot. So,
Well, here's another wrinkle that I got from the commentary I was listening to. Would it change your interpretation of the film to know that the set piece in the can you hear me? Oh,
yeah,
you blanked out for a bit. The set piece in the woods in a grove is a very standard plot for a Japanese storytelling. All the characters in various ways are repeating things that you hear a lot. Very common tropes of Japanese storytelling for things set in this period or written during this period. That the woman is sexually assaulted. The men argue about it because the husband's property was harmed, and he suspects the woman of being in on it and cooperating with it. These are all things that get said a lot, not in Japanese literature in this
Sure.
kind of story. So would that oh, baby's sick of it. Would that change or adapt your interpretation of this at all? To know that
I don't see how. Maybe because I'm not familiar with that genre, for lack of a better word, right? I'm not pulling anything else in, right? I'm more or less using whatever the movie presents as we go. And so yeah, certainly, like, it kind of like if you watch Lord of the Rings and you watch Star Wars and then you go watch a Marvel movie or whatever, right, you're going to see some of those influences. And so I'm sure if there are people, and certainly at the time, right, you've got all these other instances of similar kinds of storytelling and whatever, that you would pull that in. But I don't think that I brought anything extra with me necessarily. I'm just trying to watch it as it unfolds and everything. And yeah, just kind of follow along and reference their different testimonies or whatever. But yeah, I don't know what knowing like this is a standard tropey storytelling type of thing would change my understanding of the story is all. But you're muted this time.
Yeah,
There you go.
muting it. I think it makes it the story about storytelling, which I think lends credence to it's about observation, perspective, that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
That's kind of where I'd go with that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. Overall, like, I like this movie less. It wasn't
Really?
bad, but yeah, out of the two of them, I didn't like this one as much. I'm not really sure like what the whole deal with the baby is at the end. Like, is the implication that the samurai and the chick like left the baby, or they just find a random baby like that just happens to be there?
I think it is just a random baby that was
Right.
left as a foundling.
It's literally like it's like a MacGuffin that's there so that you can have a hopeful ending, so that the priest can have faith in humanity restored.
Yeah,
It's
honestly,
literally like
I listened to that whole commentary by this really great, and that's exactly what he said. It was thrown in at the last minute because the script was so dismal and so sad that he's like, I can't end the story like this. So he just threw it in at the end.
And it's funny because like the story takes an even deeper dive actually, because even the priest like all but pulls a piece on the guy and be like, you're gonna eat this baby or whatever he thinks is gonna happen. Like, you're gonna because the other guy steals from the baby, right? He steals the kimono, so it's like, he's got nothing left. You can't take that too. He's like, bro, I've got 6 kids. We're not gonna notice one more, and then you get the whole like, let's hug it out, the happy ending, and the rain goes away and whatever. But yeah,
after the woodcutter that had watched everything also went in and stole the tanto that people were like, wait, where did that go? Oh, that was really valuable. And it was like the listener of the story, it was like, you took it too, so you're just as bad as everyone else. And so now I'm taking the kimono. I'm just it's the same thing. Everyone is selfish and everyone has to, the only way you survive is looking out for yourself, as it was kind of evidenced by the rest of the story. And so the woodcutter being selfless by just taking in a baby, and he says they're not going to notice. I think you'd notice a 7th mouth to feed, honestly, but whatever.
Not after he makes 10 Rios selling that dagger, though. So selling that
right,
that
to a certain
tanto,
extent, it makes sense that he took the tanto, sold it, then he can feed his family, and he can then do this good thing to this baby. But they don't really spell that out. But poor priest is just like, now you have restored my faith in man. Saying, okay,
yeah,
it was just okay. He just needed like something to grasp onto. He was he was ready to just end it. He was
so. What's the Greek word for baby? Because instead of Deus ex machina, it's Deus ex baby. Just literally infant falls from the sky. Be like, oh, faith in humanity restored. Praise the gods. And then I don't know. That was just kind of funny because it's literally tacked onto the story. But yeah, but I don't know. Like overall, it's by its nature and literally on design, it's just less of a tight story, and then having that tacked on at the end as well, as your final act was just kind of a little goofy. But the having it as a thought experiment on like what is objective truth and how do you figure that out and stuff like that, fine, I can follow that along and whatever. But if you want to, in my mind, and like this isn't necessarily even just like a recency bias, but maybe it is. If you want a better version of that, go watch Memento. that's where you can get into like what's objective truth and what's actually happening in the story and that sort of thing. And not to mention the fact that it's like I liked how the dude used his condition against himself. So like that shit cuts deep. But in this case, it's just like it just feels like chaos and for like no good reason, right? Like I'm usually a fan of like if I'm going to enjoy fiction, if I'm going to employ fiction, I feel like it's got to be telling me a story, right? If I want a mess, I will go watch a documentary about real life, or I'll go watch, like let's go watch a war documentary or something like that. If you want to see people be bad to people with no moral outcome, right? But why would I want to sit here and watch this movie, like to get the same kind of thing, right? That's just me and personally, but yeah.
I guess that's one of the reasons why, like, as I was watching more of it, like, I think they're being possessed by demons, and that's what's happening.
It's a perfectly valid interpretation. Apparently, if we're going to believe that the medium is legit, then we have to believe that demons exist, which they certainly do in their culture, right? There's good spirits and demons. That's what we got. So
I have a book around here about all of the different oni and yokai that, like, they have a bunch of crazy ones. Some of them are very benign, but like if this thing was fearsome as they had kind of described, and it's just haunting the area and driving people to madness and just doing terrible things, there is no more point to it. That's just what it does.
Right.
And therefore there's no resolution to a story except for there's Deus Ex Infans.
Yeah, right. Thanks for the French, but yeah, no.
Well, that's
and
what
it's
Latin
funny
says.
too,
The Deus Ex is a Latin thing and not Greek, and so I just looked at the Latin word. It's Infans.
There you go. So, well, and it's funny too, like in another kind of weird thing, it's like you've got this demon running around, but like we've got the mighty gate of the fortress because that's what the word means, right? But it's clearly been like burned down and half destroyed, and they don't mind looting the lumber just to build a small fire to wait out the rain. And so it's like, what's the story there? Of course there'd be a demon running around, or maybe they just got attacked by a demon 3 days ago. And
right. So that was one of the reasons that the priest was so strung out. Is like there was war, earthquakes, fire, famine, plague, everything that had gone bad, could go bad, had gone bad in this area. Yeah. And there's like, I don't know, it's just a terrible oni.
Yeah, that's right. He starts with that, and then he's like, and none of that even compares to how bad this next story is. And I'm like, bro, like I don't want to be insensitive, but in some places that's a Tuesday, right? Like, like if you've got a city big enough to have a gate this big protecting it, I can't imagine that this kind of duel and interaction is that wildly uncommon. Like the uncommon part seemed to be the fact that no one could settle on what the story was, and maybe the implication that it was like maybe the ghost is lying and maybe the woman is lying and all of this other stuff. I mean, like those would shake your faith, right? That shook his faith in man. All the other stuff, I guess, was just supernatural minus the war, right? A plague or an earthquake or whatever might as well be demons, as much as they could change about it. But this one was people and people being bad to each other, or whatever. But
yeah, and they never like tied up with the say court proceedings decide, okay, the bandit's probably going to be put to death, but what's going to happen to the woman? Like, she was a highborn noble woman. Is she just going to be carted back off to her family? Is she also going to be put to death for something? I mean, they just kind of leave it.
I think she just gets to wander around the grove in misery until she becomes the next demon. Like, I think that's, what the court demands at that point. So, but yeah, the bandit certainly seemed to think he was going to die. I guess, it's funny thinking about it too, because now we're going back to like, dude. So like the bounty hunter or whatever that brings him in, the bandit was like impaled by like a dozen arrows, so like, what's the story with that?
I think they were just in the ground that he had when he had fallen off the horse because he was sick. It did kind of look like he was impaled. I don't think he was actually injured from it, and he claimed that he was injured from food poisoning.
Yeah,
I don't remember. I don't know, but they had counted how many arrows that he had taken from the highborn man. And then he was claiming that he had been sick from drinking bad water. Maybe that's certainly possible. Maybe he's sick because demons.
So the director's take from the movie is, you've got demons in your blood, you should do cocaine about it. So
It's like-
we're gonna go old
It's like
school.
with the whole Vadarong is Rashid thing. Like she gets hung up on something, and that's it. The demons. Vadarong's Rashid.
Prove me wrong, man.
Yeah, I was like, the way the movie is structured, it's a perfectly valid interpretation. It's not a common interpretation, but it is valid.
If we go by the sensible scientific theory, you have to prove it right. I don't have to prove you wrong.
Okay, this movie is already taken for a fact that a medium is talking through a dead person. Like,
Does
the
it, though?
movie.
You just said it maybe doesn't.
I was saying
I
that
certainly was challenging the interpretation,
Yeah.
but
I
Andreas
have
and the
taken
director seemed to
that
be like,
the medium is real.
They
That this
believed it.
was the husband's story speaking through the medium.
I don't know if I believe in it. I assume the movie makers is trying to establish that it's supposed to be real. What happened there because of the voice change. But I don't know if that's actually their intent. Their intent.
maybe it was the demon possessing the medium, pretending to be the husband.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got demons around and you're also trying to speak to the dead, it's probably a little bit dangerous.
Generally, pretty good movie. Foundational. Did you guys get something out of it? Especially director, right? That's what you wanted. Is you wanted examples of Kurosawa movies that,
Mm-hmm. I mean,
It's not what I expected. The second movie was more what I expected.
See, and I watched Yojimbo first, so yeah, I definitely got a high bar set, and then
I started with the oldest one because I figured older one is probably worse.
yeah. You were proven right in this case. I don't think that was scientific, but you were
I don't know
proven
if
right
it's
in this case. Yeah.
By my experience, the older the year on the movie, the higher the chance that I will find it less enjoyable.
See, it's a risky play because with artists, sometimes the later stuff is the experimental stuff, right? Where
Right,
they've started to do drugs and they don't give a shit about the reputation. They just want to make art now. So
That's actually exactly what happens with Akira Kurosawa, by the way. Like, Dodeska Den is one of his later movies, and it's a patchwork of very miserable urban poverty stories in contemporary Japan in the 60s. And then there's like Ron and Dreams is an anthology on the topic of dreams, and it's in color and it's weird.
I thought Ron was one of his more acclaimed movies.
It is. Oh, it is. But
Yeah,
people,
because
you got people who claim
other high
Gojo.
artists really dig
Right,
on
it's-
that. I mean,
Like
high
Yojimbo,
artists, not like
Yojimbo is actually almost his like most conventional. Like, if you're a bro and you're in a fraternity and you want to watch a movie by Akira Kurosawa, it's this one. It's Yojimbo.
yeah, bro. So anyway, Yojimbo, great movie.
Yojimbo.
Apparently, I'm now a bro.
It's fine. No, you can be a bro.
I
Embrace
gotta
it,
go
man.
get some gains and get swole.
You know what I mean? So it's a very accessible movie, but it's also pretty miserable and dismal. But it's so popular that there's a sequel, which I consider quite a bit more
Right.
upbeat.
Is that the Zatoichi meets Sanjuro?
There's Zatoichi, which Yojimbo is one, but Sanjuro is the other film. The only two that Akira Kurosawa was involved with were this one and Sanjuro.
Oh, okay, so that's a different. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like Yojimbo is also extremely foundational because it said that Django from 1966 was based on this movie. I can absolutely see that. And then it has its own lineage. The Fistful of Dollars trilogy with Sergio Leone was based on this, or at least heavily inspired by.
One of them was.
And then because he basically made up his own name, it's like that Clint Eastwood character is just like the man with no name. He's just like, yeah,
Right.
okay. And Clint Eastwood had apparently said things other ways of directly basing characters on Mifune in these movies. And I think Samurai Champloo took Yojimbo almost word, not quite word for word, because it did add its own absurdity, but for like about 6 episodes of there were just the same problems but animated.
Right.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's just a great story. Like the one that sticks out most prominent, like I said, is Last Man Standing. It's Bruce Willis and Christopher Walken is like the main bodyguard for one of the gangs, but it's literally, gunslinger slash samurai in this case. Just shows up into the town, and he goes to the inn that nobody is staying at because they've got their own inns that are run by the gang, and the innkeeper's like, "Oh, boy, you should get out of here before you get, wrapped up in this." He's like, "Wrapped up in this? That sounds like I could make some money, cha-ching," and starts working angles to get the gangs to take themselves out, but it's also like, to me, because it's foundational, I'm sure, like there's so many like classic, more like samurai tropes about it, right? Where it's just like, let's sit around and drink, sake in this case, and stroke our beard while we think, thoughts. But then like the one brother who shows up, he's a little bit more chunky, and that sort of thing. I forget the dude's name, but he shows up with just that classically fierce like samurai glare, and he's just like glaring at the main character. And there's so much body language in this story that so much of the communication happens just by Yojimbo just like not making eye contact with these characters that are trying to stare him down and show how tough they are, and he could give a shit, because it's like, okay, draw your sword then if we're going to do something about it. And his negotiations, like all the other masters of this gang are getting paid like 2 gold, and he's he gets offered 5, and he's like, yeah, if you add a 0 to the end of that, maybe I'll stay. As he just walks. That's his negotiation tactic. He's just like, I'll just go see what the other gang wants to pay me. Just so many good scenes, as much as anything. And what semi annoys me though is like he settles down in the town, and he's got a semi noble purpose of like, let's clean up the town so people can live here again. But like, making money is also probably part of the thing, but then he just like gives the money to that family, and then they can go escape and like theoretically make a new life for themselves. But it's like, bro lost all his money gambling. I don't think he's just going to have a noble turn of heart just because he got a lucky break this time. But
well,
like,
he
other
did
than that,
severely suffer for his actions. Him and his whole family suffered for his actions, not just from the gambling, but like that's enough that you might be able to hope he learned his lesson.
Yeah, sure, hopefully. But maybe that's me being cynical in this case, that it's like you give a gambler 25 gold and he's not going to just like magically change his ways, but we can hope, I guess. I think that's the point of the story. The point of the story is like, he really changed his ways because he totally stepped back into town to give you this thank you note. He could have died, so, but I don't know, man, just so many good things, walking up to the first gang in the thing and be like, oh yeah, well, I've committed every crime in the book, and I've murdered in 12 star systems and just whatever else. It's like, okay, well, you're all very adorable. Should we fight? So,
That's very cute. Now fill them hands.
right, exactly. Yeah.
As I really enjoyed the movie, actually. Probably one of the best Ben recommendation movies.
Yeah.
But he was very hyper competent, right?
Oh yeah.
And I kind of liked the kind of his, I'd say his hubris kind of is a little bit his downfall. Like, he wasn't, like, when they came in there, didn't have his sword close enough, and and generally I found the movie to be quite enjoyable. I feel like it kind of stumbled a little because I see how they wanted to, like, I liked the fall from grace a little bit, and then, but the pacing felt off with this, like, the recovery, everything there felt very squished together all of a sudden and very fastly resolved.
It's definitely one of those movies where time passes, but you only get a couple of little quips about how long things have been, and it's not a focus of the movie. And yeah, those can be problematic for me. And like, it took me until like Rogue One to realize that Star Wars does the same thing. And ever since I noticed that it's bugged the shit out of me, because like you get some throwaway lines, just as an example to build a foundation, but it's like you get some throwaway lines that it's like Han Solo got the Millennium Falcon to hyperspeed, so they must be on the other side of the galaxy by now. And that might be an exaggeration, but then in Rogue One, it's like, oh, we just heard that Scarif is under attack, so we mustered the entire Rebel fleet and got in orbit in 5 fucking minutes. And it's like, bro, like even just to get into orbit should have taken longer than that. So it's like you get these little funny, time things. But like Yojimbo has the same problem, right? There are a couple of times where it's like you can tell a couple of nights have passed or whatever. I think there's one line where it's like, it's been 10 days since anything happened or whatever. And then you get his recovery.
I think that's where it is.
Yeah. Right. And then you get his recovery, and it's like, well, I drank some water and had a good night's sleep and a bowl of rice. So therefore, but it's very clear that they've been bringing him supplies for some time, but you just don't know how long, So it's just like, it's not important to the story, but it was one of those things that kind of pulled me out a little bit,
I will say around there with his recovery, it was a line that was almost as good to me for me than the fill you had, your hands, you son of a bitch. Where he's like, he takes the knife and he goes, he's like, you're just going to use that? I'll make sashimi out of them.
That's funny. That one didn't stick with me, but I did like the fact that like during his recovery, he's practicing with the knife because he knows he's going to have to take out the bastard with the pistol, right? But he does it as a samurai, right? It's almost like one of those like, white hat, black hat types of tropes where, like he doesn't stoop to using some cheap trick necessarily. He spends literally days, possibly weeks, honing the skill that he was like, well, I need some kind of ranged weapon so that he can just huck this knife at the dude from like 30 feet away, so he doesn't get blasted by the gun. And that's one of the things where they were like, this is totally like Fistful of Dollars, where he puts on a breastplate made out of a furnace cover. It's like, I mean, okay, I guess the theming is similar, but like Clint Eastwood didn't spend 3 weeks like forging that breastplate, or whatever. I don't know. It was just good and kind of interesting, in seeing the blend, right? Like seeing some of those Western influences where it's like, bro's like, hey, I've traveled around and you can tell because I got me a gun, so.
Yeah, the guy with the gun was weird. Every time he fired, I was like, how many bullets did he buy? But
right.
I am distracted by logistics sometimes.
Yeah, his trick at the end, it's like, it's okay, I fired twice, so it's empty, it's so. Also pretty brutal movie, interestingly, which was fun because like they mentioned that in the trivia too, that it was like, he almost kind of regretted it because he felt like it was a gateway to a bunch of other, similar style things. But it's like, definitely a lot more fountains and pools, and even, the dog in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like you're watching it and he's a goofball, right? The dude is just like fucking around in a field. He throws a stick for no fucking reason. He goes to the one guy being a jackass, gets some water, and then it's like, okay, wander into town, like I don't know what I'm doing and whatever, and then you see a dog with a severed hand and you're like, excuse me, what the fuck is that?
I think the stick was because he got to a fork in the road and he didn't know which way to go, so he used the stick, throw it up,
okay.
And then it's like wherever it falls is how he decided to go. That's how little he cared. And then like,
gotcha.
The dog was goofy, but I quite enjoyed how weird it was. The dog looked happy to just have a hand.
Right. Got to be a hand. Yeah. Yeah.
It was kind of funny to see in live action anime fights, by which you mean that's like, oh, there's people with katanas and then they move past each other and then there's giant fountains of blood. That's like classic anime tropes. And it's like, yeah, now doing it with live action is a bit messy.
Oh yeah.
I feel like black and white kind of added like some, like it was like the blood was like more impactful or seemed less fake, especially for the time, because it was black and white.
Sure.
I can see that. Sometimes the color is off when they try to make it bright red.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the climactic battle was, interesting for that, right? Because it's basically like half of the fight is the knife throw, like just straight up like seeing him fling the knife and the impact and the damage and the guy like shooting twice in the air and whatever. And the next half of the fight is him killing 12 dudes in one hit, where he's just like, dead, dead, dead. You took 2 hits, you're dead. And it's just like, yep, that's why he was worth 50 gold apparently. So
and then there was the guy crying for mommy, and he says, "Children shouldn't play with swords. Go back home and eat gruel for the end of your days." Because that was the kid that was fighting with his parents in the beginning.
Right. He's fucking the sheriff. He's like, "Go hang yourself."
Yeah.
Constable, whatever, like that. I don't know what a constable was fully responsible for in this time period, but he did fuck all.
Right.
He took care of announcing the time, apparently.
Right. Yeah. Ben, if you were saying something, you were muted. So your software. There you go. Oh,
try again.
One more. Yeah.
Technical difficulties.
The host unmuted. Okay. I have a mute button that I've been pressing.
Sure.
It's this one right here. Okay. So one of the things that came up with the commentary on this one was how it's kind of at a very delicate period of Japanese history where it's the transition from samurais and daimyos and that sort of thing into an industrialized commercial period.
Same era of time as the Last Samurai movie.
It's a little bit earlier, but it's pretty close.
That's so. Of course, then the gun is a great symbol of that. But also, the two sides are. It's very easy to kind of mistake what's going on with the two sides because the two sides of the conflict are not the guys who are the businessmen themselves. They're just the gangs that the businessmen have hired. Right. So at the root of this all is the commercial. What at the root of this all is the commerce of this period, creating the problems for this period, because there's a massive commercial boom in this period. There are the problems that they're having. And I think that's kind of an interesting take, which adds a lot to my understanding of what's going on with the film. And that's why the constable, who is, I think the silk merchant, finally just kills the sake guy. And there's peace in the town because there's only the one business. Of course, everyone's dead and miserable.
Right.
But I think if you look at it if you're looking at that lens, it almost becomes that meme of like, reject modernity, embrace tradition, because the samurai, the Ronin, is this wandering samurai. He usually lives in a castle town, but now he's just wandering around on the roads. He should have his lord and his, he's basically a knight, but now he's just wandering around, purposeless, useless.
Yeah. When I was talking to my brother about that, I was mentioning that I was a little confused that they just kept calling him samurai, and I'm like, maybe I don't understand the transition of the time period, or maybe they're just using it as shorthand for the audience. But it's like, shouldn't he be a Ronin? If we're gonna split hairs, But sure. Yeah, because it's like he's definitely not. He doesn't seem like he's a landed noble right now, So, but yeah. No, and yeah, for sure, because it's like we're sitting here talking about it, and then I start thinking about the destruction of industry, right? Because they burned down the silk warehouse, which it's like that's got to be like years of effort at least. They lose, hundreds of gallons, if not thousands of gallons of sake and, all of that stuff. And so it's like, yes, but the town is free of the gamblers. It's got no industry anymore either. And they certainly weren't, farming any food crops. So good luck with that. But my work here is done.
Well, keep in mind what gambling might mean in that context. Are the gamblers the people who are playing cards for money? Or is it probably the businessmen who are gambling with the town? So that's a huge aspect, I think, going on.
By the end of it, though, so there was only the one prominent business guy, right? And his house, for lack of a better word, he gets ransacked, right? But he never gets involved in the vengeance part, right? He doesn't get his comeuppance. He doesn't whatever. He's still there somewhere, right? or did I miss him getting killed
There
in
was
one of the scenes? Like,
there was like two prominent businessmen, right, kind of attached to the two gang leaders who also had their
Right.
own more shady business. And they both got their businesses destroyed, but I don't think either of them died.
No, but
Right.
the brewer did die, and the brewer was one of them that
Did
had
the brewer
signed.
die? That I
Yeah,
remember
because
seeing.
that's
Well-
the silk merchant / mayor person that did both. Just at the end, killed the
Okay.
sake brewer, right?
Okay. And that was Tokamon, who I was thinking of specifically because he was the guy who like took over the other gambler's house and was, taking his wife and everything like that. So
Yes,
so yeah.
Pokemon had taken the wife in the gambler's house, but
Okay.
when they
I didn't realize he was also the sake brewer. That was the disconnect I had.
right, and then there were other times when they're swapping houses, like they ransacked the brothel, smoked them out, and then the gangsters moved into the brothel because they could, and so there was a lot
Right.
of house swapping.
Yeah.
I was very confused in the end with the gang leader with the scar, going with his prayer drum. What he was like, his whole behavior there. What was going on? I didn't really
That was
get what.
Wasn't that the silk merchant, right? And the innkeeper had said that he was going out with this prayer drum every day. I don't know, hoping for good business, peace enough just to be able to survive.
No, but in the end, he's like the gunman thug has been killed, or he's dying on the floor.
Mhm.
He's like, who's beating the prayer drum for me? And I thought that was his brother.
I don't
the
think it was his brother.
leader. Okay.
I mean,
then he goes like, he runs around crazy banging, and then he like, and he goes and chops someone down.
Yeah, I don't think that was his brother. I think that was just one of the merchants trying to survive.
Okay, that's for sure that was his brother.
I did enjoy the really dumb brother, though. Kichi with the crazy unibrow.
Yeah.
Really stupid characters are entertaining to me, and just the ridiculousness of that unibrow got me every time.
Yeah, well, it was just funny because like he was doing the classically fierce look, in a couple of places, but then also totally an idiot and a coward, So it was just great where it was like he immediately recognized that the Yojimbo character was a badass, and so he shows up trying to intimidate him to see if maybe he can improve his standing a little bit. With something like that, but then spends the rest of the movie just being like, "Watch out, guys! We got a badass over here." And then kind of sets off the climax by dude just comes in and be like, oh my god, they killed the 6 dudes already, go get help, as he goes to kill the 6 dudes. Which was like only the second time we really got to see him like show how much of a badass he was compared to everybody else in town. That was just like, again, one hit kill everybody for the most part, and spend the next 20 minutes like just wrecking the place to make it look like 20 dudes just showed up to take these guys out. So
yeah, there's one guy and 5 minutes of work, and then he says, yeah, it must have been 15 or 16 guys who did all of this.
Right. Yeah.
I was so confused when they were carrying him in the coffin, because he's like, go get a coffin, and the next thing you know, they're carrying that bucket. I was like, and it took me like until it's like, get him to help you carry the coffin. It's like, oh, that's a coffin in Japan back then, right? Okay, I get it.
Right. You were expecting more traditional European,
I was expecting a Western coffin, as I know it.
Yeah.
Also, like the audacity, like he's like really hurt. He's like, he's really hurt, and he's like, no, put me down. This sounds fun. I want to see.
Yeah.
Right.
He's a fun kind of classic Ronin / samurai character of just like he's kind of grizzled. He doesn't really care about things, but he just really wants to see things, have a fun time. But then he had that heart of gold that he tries to ignore, and that he has to help the family and the woman get away and give them 30 ryo, which is, I mean, 1 ryo is not a lot, but it's a significant amount. But
gold.
30 is quite a lot. It was hard. It's hard for me
Right.
to actually understand how much would that translate to now, because it's not a standard denomination, but that's a significant amount.
Yeah, I wikied it, and they give you like like the number of grams of gold and whatever. So it's like you could really do like a conversion if you wanted to. But like what was crazy is like at the time, well, maybe not the time anyway, but it's like, so it was like, you know equivalent to like 50 silver or 4,000 brass coins was like one of the conversions, which doesn't necessarily help either. But it was like 1 Rio is equal to no, that's just the silver again. There was a part where it was like converted to rice, and I was like, that is a fucking lot of rice. So 1 Rio was also considered equivalent to 1 koku of rice. It was enough rice to feed one person for a year.
That's a lot.
They had like a weight. Here we go. Maybe. Oh, and it varies, I guess. So different periods. So that was enough rice for a year. There was another one where it was like, four. It was worth 4 of those, depending on the time period. And I can't find it equal to. Oh yeah, 150 kilograms or 330 pounds of rice. Like that's what a koku is or whatever. So it's just like a stupid amount of rice. And then like if he's from the time period where it was like a 1-to-4 ratio, like he just got 1,200 pounds worth of rice per coin, and given the dude 30, like obviously you're not going to just sit down and buy that much rice, and who knows what the going rate of the housing market is in that day and age. But he gave that guy a stupid amount of money, right? Like basically think about it like anywhere from 30 years or more, of rice equivalent, so it was just kind of crazy. But
yeah, it's like I was apparently had underestimated how much I thought one was worth. It's like I was thinking that you could probably, without work and just buying things, sustain yourself at like a month or two, but you could probably do for significantly more than that.
Right.
So it's funny that like 1 or 2 Rio is too little to risk killing a bunch of people for, as it was beginning the bargaining, but 30 is a jaw-dropping amount.
Right.
His absolute, like, what do you say? Is it bafflement, or like when he comes back out after having freed the wife, and he just comes back out, he's thrown the money on the ground, and they're just all there kneeling. It's like, what are you fucking, get out of here? Take them
Right.
home.
We're supposed to be gone by
They're
now.
literally running. Yeah, they're literally running. So, yeah. Okay. So interestingly, it's only $56 per gram today, and it was 15 grams of gold. So it was like $840 per coin, I guess. So it's not like a stupid amount of money by today's standards, like inflation and everything, maybe. But
Great. So is it $840 of today's money, or $840 of 1860 money?
No, of like today's money. So
Okay.
I mean, it was like somewhere around $25,000 to $30,000 worth of money. So it's like a chunk, but it wasn't like $1 million or whatever, right? So like if you were to convert it in today's prices, but it definitely seemed to go further back then. So, but like literally today's price on gold, if you convert it to grams and everything like that, it's like he gave him somewhere around 25 grand just to get out. So you could see how that would definitely start your new life in a new town and get you on your feet and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas to them, it definitely seemed like, like some of those guys were getting paid like 2, and he got paid 25 times that. And so
more than that,
like,
so the 2 that went and killed a magistrate, they got paid 2 silver pieces, and he got paid 25 Rio. So how many silver pieces per Rio?
The other masters were getting paid like 2 Rio when, like, in the opening scene where he walks in to do the haggling. Yeah,
the guy that ran away because he realized.
Yeah, the 2 silver, those guys got the shaft. Yeah, so yeah. Was it Master Hanso or whatever?
I forgot his name, but the one that he was crawling over the side of the wall and bye.
Yeah,
have fun,
smiling the whole way. Yeah,
so he's not going to stick around for that shit.
Right. Well, yeah, but so doing the comparatives in that scene, it was just crazy that dude just walks in to like these 6 or 7 other masters, quote unquote, demands 25 times their wages, more or less. And then it was like, what kind of badass guy do you got to be to demand 25 times and just expect it, right? And I mean, you get to see that over the course of the movie, but it's just super interesting trying to get all the different comparatives, not having a point of reference of like how much that would be and whatever. But, if you assume like at a minimum, one of those coins will feed you for a year, that's a lot of money, so.
Is there any more movies with Yojimbo as the main character?
Yeah, there's a sequel. So same actor, same idea. It's funny because like his, I forget what his first name was and whatever, but like it's whatever Mulberry Bush, right? And then when he goes into the next town, he does the exact same thing, which is why they say like he's the man without a name, and might have semi originated that trope, because he just picks whatever thing he sees out in the field as his surname. So, but.
Yeah, but they mostly just call him Sanjuro, which kind of sounds like he's saying 30 years old. But he's, as he mentions, he's a little bit closer to 40. But that's just the name that they call him by, if they call him anything, because like the guy with the gun was just calling him 2-bit the whole time, or they call him like Samurai or something else.
There's actually an interesting connection. I don't know if it's in the trivia. I didn't hear anyone talk about it. That apparently Kurosawa, one of the places that Kurosawa specifically took inspiration in this film was with the coffin maker, very concerned about his profit and whatnot. But there's a scene where the guy's just banging in the background, and that apparently was taken directly from High Noon, with that scene with the coffin. And
I wondered about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was actually explicitly a thing.
Yeah, I did see it referenced. Yeah, didn't bring it up though, so that was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. He said that it was particularly influenced by High Noon, and I can see how that is at least one point of direct reference.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. It's kind of funny. It's like, I mean, I could see some of the theming and that sort of thing and whatever, and there's a little bit of plotting, but I mean, Sanjuro was way more effective in a way, right? In a lot of different ways, and spent a whole lot less time talking and worrying about his outcome. But yeah, I could definitely see some influences anyway. But
the coffin maker is kind of a funny character. It's like he's happy when people are killing each other because he's making good business. But then when it gets so bad, he's walking around morosely. It's like, when it gets this bad, they don't worry about coffins.
Right. Yeah. And he bought all that wood, man. He's got to make the return on his investment. So
yeah, maybe he can build something else. I don't know. They might need a few more walls, as they burnt most of them down.
Yeah, I know that city was also rubble at the end.
Yeah.
There were just like buildings falling over in the street and shit like that. But
yeah, I mean, I also thought it was so peculiar to me that this, what seems like a lawman of some sort, comes and is there for 10 days, and nobody of all the people who are just like hiding and not involved in this goes and be like, listen, shit's wild here, we need help.
Right.
That risks them getting severely punished if they were caught doing something like that.
Where was the marshals? Where's the posse, man? Come on.
They're getting paid off.
Right.
Yeah. And then the inspector from Shogun, I guess, was there for 10 days, and he was there for too long, and that's why Ushitora had sent the two to go kill the magistrate in the other town and then draw him away. But he's not going to be told yet until tonight, but that's why he's going to leave tomorrow. And I know all this thing, so you should just come into my employ tonight.
Right.
Should have paid them more.
Yeah. I mean, they end up just getting killed in the street anyway, right? So, like, brother ends up shooting him, doesn't he? So.
Yeah, they exchange, and he just walks up and like, bam, bam, haha, now there's no leverage.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I enjoyed it. It's definitely good. I mean, I found it on that list Ben thing, but I say it's called Ben's pick, and I'd say it's the best movie Ben's picked. I think. What else have you? No, I think
Well,
the
yeah,
Western one, the Western horror one, that was really good too. I really like that.
yeah, I can barely even watch that one anymore.
Yeah, Bone Tomahawk.
Bone Tomahawk.
Yeah. No, it was a really good pick, and I really appreciate you, giving us 2 good recommendations there. So, but
Well, when you say Kurosawa, I'm like, oh, this is my wheelhouse. Kurosawa, Hitchcock, and Kubrick. I was a little snob growing up, and I like great movies.
We've noticed,
and they were mostly great. Hey, and they're mostly pretty great. There's some weird ones, some bad ones. Yeah, this is kind of my wheelhouse. Let me know if there's anything else you want to pick out. I'd say neither of these are my favorite, but I think they're representative of kind of a couple directions he goes with the samurai stuff. And his films in general tend to be a bit on the bleak side. Even the hopeful ones.
Yeah,
you don't say.
I mean, that's
even the hopeful
Eastern
ones.
storytelling.
Well,
So
kind of sometimes, but it's also that blend of the way that the Eastern kind of dismal endings that they pair very well with the Western style, and so they've just been feeding in back and forth into each other. I think a lot.
That's interesting. I wonder.
Yeah, this was fun. It makes me want to watch more anime. But, it really reminds me of Samurai Champloo, which is one of my favorites. So therefore, it's just like I kind of just want to put that on in the background and enjoy that.
Weeb.
You just wait.
Yeah,
as long as the husband's okay with it.
Oh, he loves it too.
Yeah, then have yourself an anime day.
yeah. It sounds like that's every day, Andreas. So she didn't need an excuse to watch anime. She needed an excuse for that particular anime.
Yeah.
Well, have yourself that one.
All right. Well, we'll. I guess we did 2 movies, get us 1 hour of conversation. That seems to maybe we figured this out. We shouldn't do 5 or 10.
Yeah, right. Half the people watched. Half of them.
I've watched everything except that one time when I didn't get to catch one of my own. Otherwise, I've watched them all. Have you watched the hide and seek movie yet?
I did start hide and seek. Oh no! I'm thinking of the monster one. The one where it's the guy who's accused of touching a child. That's the movie.
That's
that you
The Hunt.
The Hunt. You like that one a lot, but so I started that one. I could not keep going.
It's very good.
Hide and seek is not. Let me see.
Right.
Is it? Just watch. Let me check the availability on that. I tend to rely on streaming for this. I remember looking it up on the streaming. Let's see,
it's
the Hide and Seek 2016.
I think it's newer than that. Let me check because it might not even be hide and seek.
Are you saying?
I just call it that. It's
Are
ready
you
or not.
Ready or not? Yeah, I was like,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
2018. That you said you were gonna watch. Didn't get a chance to watch, but because you talked so nicely of it, you were gonna watch it.
I was going to watch it, but now you see it's on Direct TV, and I'm not a subscriber to Direct TV, so I'll have to wait for it to be accessible some other time. That sort of movie comes up on Amazon Prime all the time, though. I feel like it doesn't take it only takes like 3 or 4 years, and then goes to the Amazon Prime circulation. I don't think it's going to be a Netflix movie. It's
on Netflix here.
Oh, see, that's the thing. No, not over in the US.
Yeah. Why didn't you like The Hunt? Just to quickly ask while we.
There's even someone to root for in that one.
Yeah. He's innocent. He's a good guy. Why didn't you like it, Ben?
What the Hunt?
Yeah.
I may surprise you, but I don't really like high pressure social situations like that. I don't like that kind of witch hunt story. I don't like the And the general topic is really dark and very real to me, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time thinking about that. Right? You might still hear my daughter
He
in
was
the background.
he was
Oh,
also
I
a
don't.
teacher, right? So
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
a little
that's
too on the nose.
yeah, that's the sort of thing that would really. It's not a fantasy for me. Like
It's a personal nightmare.
it's not a reality either, but a false accusation like that could kill you.
Right.
It almost
So
does for
It's kind
him.
of one of
that's
that's
done.
kind of the point of
And
the movie.
even if you're exonerated, I did read ahead to the ending. Even if you're exonerated, does it mean
Right.
anything?
Yeah, that is exactly the point of the movie. That's how it ends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it's like, even though it's clearly proven, it's like someone still like, it's like I believe he did it. Like that's how it kind of ends.
Yeah, right. Whew, not really where I want to. I'm not always. I don't mind Kurosawa. I like Kurosawa. I used to really like Kurosawa, but I tend to try to avoid the bleak stuff as much as I can. Bittersweet is my sweet spot these days. A lot of the stuff that I've picked for the podcast of the years, I'm like,
Flavor of the Fireflies.
oh, yeah, that's kind of a legacy pick of things that I used to really get into, and
Because
that
that shit
was mostly just
like,
Grave of the Fireflies is mostly just very
that's
very
sad.
sad. Very, and it's not like it's not as I think Bone Tomahawk is actually something I'd be less interested in rewatching. I know that was one of my picks. That's why I'm just talking about it. It's
Right.
but those are movies I figured, you know what? I think the crew would really like that movie, Bone Tomahawk, and you did. I'm glad. I want to share movies that I've seen that I kind of like that I know you guys will like, but I guess for some of you, Bone Tomahawk was a bridge too far, which is fine.
I liked it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
This
Oh.
has been
All
an
right,
episode.
next time. What
we did.
what are we doing next time?
No fucking clue.
Yeah.
Up in the air.
Director,
Figuring it out.
Probably.
What's your favorite
movie.
thing about film, director?
My favorite thing about film?
I don't know, directors, music,
I don't know.
stories, kind of stories.
Favorite's a hard
genres.
thing to put, I guess.
I don't know.
Like, if there's a person that like I'm generally always enjoying something, I don't know, David Lynch, maybe. Wait, am I
Okay.
thinking? No, Fincher. Fincher's the one I was thinking of. I always mix them up.
Fincher. So 2 Fincher movies. Next time on While We Weren't Recording. Talk about weird.
Yeah, that might be a bit weird. We'll see.
Hey.